Rain fell on the small grave as the town stood in silence. Not a single umbrella moved. Not a cough, not a whisper. Only the quiet sound of falling rain and the soft rustle of wet coats. The sky above Willow Creek was gray and heavy, matching the weight in everyone's heart. The gravestone was small and the name etched into it was unfamiliar to most of the people standing there. Ethan James 2017 to 2025. You were loved. That was all it said. No last name. No details. Just a name, a short life, and a simple message. Most of the people didn't even know who the boy was. They hadn't seen him at school, hadn't noticed him at the grocery store, never heard his laughter in the park. And yet, the entire town had come to the funeral. Pastor Miller held the small Bible in his hand, water dripping from his glasses as he looked up at the faces before him. Sometimes, he said softly, a soul comes into our world quietly, lives quietly, leaves quietly, but leaves behind something powerful. A few people nodded, unsure why their eyes stung. The boy in the ground had been a mystery, but there was something about the way his tiny casket was lowered into the earth, something that broke the silence inside them. At the back of the crowd stood a woman in a soaked yellow raincoat. Her hair was tied in a low bun, her eyes red and tired. She wasn't crying, but she had clearly cried before. No one stood next to her. No one seemed to know her name, except one man. Tom Garrett, the town's retired postman, stood under a tree, watching her. He remembered her face from somewhere. Not a conversation, not a greeting, but a glance. A look through the window of a tiny old house by the woods on Oakridge Lane. He remembered delivering a package there once. No name on the mailbox, just the number 23. He hadn't thought about it until now. After the funeral, the crowd slowly drifted away, shoes squelching in the wet grass, heads bowed. A few left flowers, some just stood for a moment and walked away. The woman in yellow stayed. She knelt by the grave and whispered something. Her lips barely moved, and her eyes stayed on the stone. Then she placed a small toy car on top of the dirt, a red one. The wind picked up. Tom didn't move. His legs felt like stone. He watched the toy car shake in the breeze, then fall off and land near his foot. He bent down, picked it up, and walked toward her. Is this yours? He asked gently. The woman looked up. Her eyes met his, pale blue, full of pain, but not surprised. She took the toy from his hand. It was his, she said. I'm sorry, Tom said. I didn't know him. No one did, she replied, her voice flat. Not really. They stood there in silence, two strangers connected by rain and loss. Tom looked down at the name again. Ethan James, he said aloud. She nodded. My son. Tom wanted to ask questions, but he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he looked at her again. Would you like a ride? She hesitated, then nodded. As they walked to his truck, Tom looked back once more. The grave was alone again, but something in his chest told him this story wasn't over, not even close. The drive was quiet for the first few minutes. Tom turned on the heater. The woman sat in silence, clutching the red toy in her lap. I'm Tom, he said finally. She looked over. Claire, he nodded. You live up on Oakridge Lane, don't you? Claire hesitated. I used to. We moved a few weeks ago, right before Ethan passed. I used to be the postman, he said softly. I think I delivered something to your house once. Claire gave a weak smile. Probably. I didn't order much. Just books. Toys sometimes. Tom glanced at her. You lived there alone with your son? Yes. The answer hung in the air like smoke. Tom wanted to ask what happened, but he knew better than to force it. Instead, he said, I'm sorry if this is too soon, but why was no one at the funeral from his school or friends? Claire looked out the window. Because he didn't have any. Tom frowned. He didn't go to school? He was homeschooled, she said. He had a condition. He couldn't be around too many people. Tom didn't press. He drove slowly, careful of the rain-slick road. When they reached the edge of town, Claire pointed to a small house near the railway tracks. It was smaller than the one on Oak Ridge Lane. The windows were covered with newspaper from inside. The lawn was overgrown. Claire got out. "Thank you," she said. Tom paused. "Do you need anything? Groceries? Help with anything?" She looked surprised. "Why would you offer that?" "Because I have a feeling," Tom said, "that your story and Ethan's deserves to be known." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she opened the gate and went inside. Tom sat in his truck for a while, the rain hitting the windshield. Something was wrong, not just with the funeral, but with the way the town hadn't known a boy had died until the obituary showed up in the paper, written by a woman no one recognized. He turned the key in the ignition again, and he decided he was going to find out who Ethan James really was. The next morning, the sun was out, but the town still felt gray. Tom walked into the town library and asked for the public records. Birth certificates, school registrations, anything. There was no birth certificate for Ethan James. No medical records, no school enrollment.it was like he didn't exist. And yet, Tom had seen the grave, had seen the mother's tears. He sat down at one of the tables, confused and unsettled. If the boy had no records, then who had buried him? Who had paid for the funeral? And why? Meanwhile, in the small house by the tracks, Claire sat by the window, holding the red toy car in her hand. She could feel it beginning, the whispers, the questions. She had done everything to protect Ethan, but now that he was gone, the truth had nowhere left to hide, and she was not ready for what would come next. Morning light touched the rooftops of Willow Creek, casting long shadows across its narrow streets. It was the kind of town where people left their front doors open, where neighbors knew each other's dog's name, where change didn't happen often, and when it did, everyone noticed. And right now, everyone had noticed something. A small child had been buried the day before, and yet, hardly anyone knew who he was. No school teachers, no local parents, no doctors. Not even Pastor Miller had known the boy's name until he read it from the paper. It didn't make sense. At T. Wilson's diner, people whispered over their morning coffee, "Who was that kid? Was he even from here? I heard his mother lived by the woods, some kind of shut-in. I heard the boy was sick, very sick." Tom Garrett sat at the counter with a dry piece of toast, listening but not speaking. He didn't like gossip, but something inside him said the town's questions weren't wrong this time. He had delivered mail for 40 years. He'd seen every new baby, every wedding invite, every birthday card, but never once had he delivered a birthday card to a boy named Ethan James. He finished his coffee, dropped some coins on the counter, and stepped out into the sunlight. His legs carried him back to the library. He wasn't done searching. Behind the counter, Mrs. Langley, the head librarian, looked up in surprise as Tom returned. "Back again?" she asked kindly. "I need help," he said. With something odd, she pushed her glasses up and motioned for him to sit. "Tell me," Tom explained what little he knew. The quiet funeral, the strange grave, the missing records. Mrs. Langley listened closely. "Let me try something," she said. She typed on her keyboard, pulling up archived issues of the town's newspaper. "We list all births in the paper. Let's check to 017. They scanned through January, February, March, nothing, then April, May, June. There, a small notice. Claire Thompson welcomes baby boy, Ethan James, born June 9. Tom pointed. "There it is, Mrs. Langley leaned in. "But look at the address. It says 23 Oak Ridge Lane." He nodded. "That's the place I remember, but it doesn't say the father's name or any hospital. Usually they mention which clinic. This one, it's just a few lines." She pulled up the town census. Claire's name was listed. Ethan's was not. "It's like he disappeared on paper after that birth notice," Mrs. Langley said. Tom stood. "Thank you." He didn't like mysteries, and he especially didn't like them when they involved children. Claire sat in the back room of her small house, surrounded by boxes. She hadn't unpacked most of them. What was the point? Ethan's toys were in one, his books in another, his little shoes muddy, broken at the heel in a third. She kept them close, even though it hurt. The knock at the door was soft, hesitant. She didn't want to answer it, but something told her she had to. She opened the door just wide enough to see Tom standing there, holding his hat. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "Can I come in?" Claire looked at him for a long time. Her eyes were tired. Finally, she stepped back. He entered slowly, quietly. The room smelled of rain and cardboard. "I went to the library," he said. "Looked into records." Claire's body tensed. "I'm not trying to invade your privacy," Tom added. "But the town's asking questions. And to be honest, so am I." Claire sat down on a wooden chair. "I didn't want attention. That's why we kept to ourselves." "I understand that," Tom said. "But why wasn't he in school? Why weren't there medical records?" Claire swallowed hard. "Because I was protecting him." "From what?" She looked up, eyes burning. "From his father." Tom froze. Claire took a breath. "Ethan wasn't sick. That's what people assumed. But the truth is, I was hiding." She walked to the shelf and pulled down a small framed photo. It showed her younger, smiling, holding a baby. "That was before things went wrong," she said. Tom sat down slowly. Claire continued. "I met Ethan's father when I was 18. He was charming, exciting, and dangerous. I didn't know that at first, but it came out. Controlling, angry. The kind of man who punches walls when dinner is cold. When I got pregnant, he told me to get rid of it. I said no." She stared at the photo. "So he left. Then he came back, begged, promised he'd changed. I let him in. A mistake." She looked at Tom now. "He hit Ethan once. Just once. That was enough. I packed everything and ran." Tom's hands tightened around his hat. "I changed my last name, moved here, told no one where we were, homeschooled Ethan, paid for everything with freelance writing online. I didn't trust anyone." She looked away. "I was terrified he'd find us." Tom said nothing. He couldn't. Claire stood, walked to the window. Ethan didn't deserve to grow up in fear, but it was better than letting that man near him. Tom finally spoke. "How did he?" Claire's voice cracked. "Pneumonia. It came fast. He had a fever one night. I gave him medicine, but by morning, her voice failed." Tom stood slowly. "I'm sorry." Claire nodded. "I'll tell the town to leave you be," he said gently, but Claire looked up. "No." Tom blinked. "No, I'm tired of hiding," she whispered. "Ethan is gone, and I can't bring him back. But maybe someone should know who he was. Just once." Tom's heart softened. "I'll help you," he said. Claire nodded. "But first, you need to know something else." She walked to the back closet, opened a box, pulled out a plastic folder. Inside were papers, a birth certificate, old school drawings, a journal, and something else, a photograph. Tom looked at it. His hands shook. The man in the photo was someone he recognized from this very town. Down at Willow Creek Police Station, an old case file set in a drawer, unsolved, domestic assault. Suspect vanished. The name? Daniel Carson, born and raised in Willow Creek, gone without a trace until now. The air in Tom's living room felt colder than usual, even though the windows were shut tight and the fireplace crackled in the corner. The photo Claire had given him rested on the coffee table. It showed a younger version of her, Ethan as a baby on her lap, and beside her a man Tom hadn't seen in years, Daniel Carson, a name that once echoed through town halls and barbershops. A local boy, good-looking, confident, star quarterback in high school. Everyone thought he'd go far. Then, one day, he was just gone. No goodbyes, no explanations, no note. And now, all these years later, Tom had seen his face again. Not on a wanted poster or in a newspaper, but in the story of a woman who had run to protect her son. Tom picked up the photo and stared at it longer. He remembered Daniel's father, Mark Carson, a strict man who ran the hardware store with an iron fist. People said he was tough but fair. Tom wondered now, what had Daniel learned from that man? He stood up, grabbed his coat, and headed out into the cold air. There were questions that needed answers. Claire sat on the floor of her small living room, surrounded by Ethan's drawings. One showed a tree with blue apples, another was a crooked house with one big window and a tiny boy inside, smiling, and then there was one she had folded and put away for months. It showed 3 people, a woman, a boy, and a man with no face. Ethan had drawn it after a nightmare. When she asked who the faceless man was, he'd simply said, "I don't know." But he watches. She had never told Ethan who his father was. She thought she'd kept the shadows away. But children always feel what their mothers carry. Claire traced the lines of the faceless man, her heart squeezing. She whispered, "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better." Tom parked outside Carson Hardware. The red letters above the door were faded now, and a closed sign hung inside the window. Even though it was just afternoon, he knocked on the glass. No answer. He knocked again. Finally, he heard a voice from inside. "We're not open today. It's Tom Garrett," he called back. "I just need to talk." The door creaked open a few inches, and Mark Carson's gray eyes appeared behind it. He had aged, broad shoulders now hunched, hair thinner, face lined. "What do you want, Tom?" "I need to ask about Daniel." The man's eyes narrowed. "What about him? You know he had a son?" Silence. Tom continued. "His name was Ethan. He died 3 days ago." Mark didn't blink. "He's dead?" "Yes," Tom said. "And Daniel's the father." Mark opened the door wider but didn't invite Tom in. "I haven't seen Daniel in almost 8 years, he said. "He left this town and never looked back." "Did he tell you where he was going?" "No, one morning he said he needed to figure himself out, took his truck." That was it. Tom studied the man's face. Claire said she ran from him, that he hit her, that he hit Ethan. Mark's mouth twitched. "My son's not perfect, but I don't believe he would hurt a child." "Why?" "Because I raised him better than that." Tom stared at him. "Or maybe you raised him to hide it better." Mark didn't reply. Tom turned to go, then paused. "If he comes back, or if you hear from him, you tell me." The old man's lips pressed together. "What do you plan to do?" Tom looked him dead in the eye. "Make sure he never hurts anyone again." Back at the house, Claire was writing. For the first time since Ethan passed, she opened her laptop and wrote about him. Not a story, not a blog post, just truth. He liked strawberry yogurt but hated strawberries. He once tried to build a spaceship out of cardboard. He was scared of thunder but loved the sound of rain. He asked about his dad once, just once, and she had lied. She wrote it all. Tears ran down her face as the words filled the screen. She didn't notice the message until it popped up in the corner of the laptop, an old email account she hadn't checked in months. One she used when she was still Claire Thompson. The subject line said, "I saw the obituary. I'm coming." Her hands shook. The sender, Daniel Carson, 77 at gmail.com. Mail to Daniel Icarans, 77 at gmail.com. Her chest tightened. He knew. Tom was still at the library when his phone rang. Claire's voice on the other end was shaky. "He knows. He's coming." "Daniel?" "Yes." "Did he say when?" "No, just, I'm coming." "Lock your doors," Tom said. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. He hung up and looked at Mrs. Langley, who was still behind the desk. "I need everything you can find about Daniel Carson." "Anything." "Arrests, jobs, phone records. I don't care if it's 10 years old." She nodded, already typing. Tom hurried out, heart pounding. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't a detective, but someone had to stand between that man and Claire. That night, Claire didn't sleep. She sat in the kitchen with a knife by her side, staring at the front door. Every sound made her jump. Every passing car made her heart stop, but the hours passed. No one came until the next morning. She stepped outside to get the mail, and there, taped to the front door, was a single piece of paper. It read, "You can't hide anymore. I want to see my son." She backed away, gasping. Then she collapsed on the steps, sobbing. Ethan was gone, and Daniel didn't even know it. The paper trembled in Claire's hand. Her fingers, cold from the morning air, struggled to hold onto it as if it might disappear. But the words were real. The black ink hadn't smudged. She read the note again. You can't hide anymore. I want to see my son. She pressed it against her chest as if doing so would stop her heart from breaking. Her knees felt weak, and she slowly sat on the edge of the porch, staring at the empty street. No cars, no people, just the whisper of wind through tall grass and the distant sound of a train. He didn't know. He thought Ethan was alive. Claire shut her eyes tightly. She had imagined this moment 100 times over the years, Daniel showing up, demanding to be let in, forcing his way back into their lives. But never like this. Never after Ethan was gone. Never when it was too late. She folded the paper with shaking hands and went inside. Tom arrived 15 minutes later. He knocked twice before she opened the door. Her face was pale, her hands clenched at her sides. Without speaking, she handed him the note. He read it once, then again. Did you see who left it? No, she whispered. I didn't hear anything. I locked the doors. I kept the lights off. He must have come while I was asleep. Tom stepped inside and closed the door gently behind him. You're sure it was him? Yes. That email yesterday. And now this. It has to be. Tom looked out the window. He doesn't know Ethan passed. Claire sank into a chair. How could he? He wasn't here. He hasn't been here for 8 years. Tom paced slowly. Do you want to tell him? Her head snapped up. No, he doesn't deserve to know, but he'll find out eventually, Tom said gently. The grave is real. It's in the paper. I don't care, Claire said. He left. He threatened us. He doesn't get to mourn my son. Tom was quiet for a long time. Then he said, what if he's already here? What if he's been watching? Claire's eyes widened. Tom placed a firm hand on her shoulder. We're going to the sheriff. Sheriff Dana Merrick had been working in Willow Creek for over 20 years. She was calm, tough, and knew how to listen. When Claire and Tom explained everything, she didn't interrupt once, only nodded. Then she leaned back in her chair and said, I remember Daniel Carson. Tom crossed his arms. Everyone does, Sheriff Merrick continued. We had one complaint back then. A woman who worked at the hospital said she saw bruises on Claire's arms. Claire wouldn't press charges. Claire lowered her eyes. I was scared. I know, the sheriff said softly. A lot of women are, but now we have a different situation. If Daniel's made contact by email, by letter, by being near your home, we can treat it as a harassment case. If you want to file, Claire hesitated. Will that stop him? No, Sheriff Merrick said honestly. But it gives me legal ground to watch him. If he shows up again, we can act. Claire signed the papers. Her hand barely held the pen steady. The sheriff folded the report and looked at her. You did the right thing. I'll post a cruiser near your house tonight. Tom turned to Claire. You're staying with me. That evening, Claire sat in Tom's guest room, staring at the stars outside. The small town below looked so peaceful. Rooftops glowing orange from street lamps, trees swaying gently. Ethan had loved stars. He would name them, give them stories. One night, he pointed at the sky and said, that one's mine. That's where I'll go when I get wings. She remembered, laughing, ruffling his hair. You don't need wings. You're already flying. She blinked hard. The sound of a creaking step pulled her from the memory. She sat up quickly, then realized it came from inside the house. Footsteps. Slow, careful. She stepped into the hallway and saw a shadow moving near the kitchen. Tom? She whispered. No answer. She picked up a heavy book from the shelf, her fingers shaking. Then the door creaked, and Tom appeared holding two mugs. He paused. You okay? She exhaled sharply and dropped the book. I thought never mind. He handed her a mug. Chamomile tea. No honey, just like Ethan liked it. Claire smiled faintly. Thank you. They sat in silence at the kitchen table, the tea warm between their hands. After a while, Claire spoke. Do you think he's dangerous? Still? Tom looked at her. Yes, maybe not in the same way, but a man who disappears from his child's Life then comes back only after death. That's not someone you trust, Claire nodded. I just want peace. You'll have it, Tom said. But there's something else you should know. He pulled out an envelope. This came from Mrs. Langley, Public Records. It's Daniel's last known employment, New Jersey. Construction work. He left the job 2 weeks ago. Right after Ethan's obituary ran in the paper, Claire felt her stomach drop. So he read it, and still said, I want to see my son. Tom nodded. He didn't read it carefully, just saw the name. Didn't read the dates. Claire stood and paced. Then he's coming for a son who isn't here anymore. Tom stared at her. Which means we have two choices. Let him come, or face him first. She turned. What are you saying? I'm saying we drive to where he's staying. Find him. End this on our terms. Claire froze. She thought of Ethan, his drawings, his soft voice, his laughter, and suddenly, she stood tall. Let's go. It took 6 hours to reach the small town outside Newark, where Daniel had last used his debit card. A cheap motel called the Driftwood Inn. Tom parked across the street. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the car engine ticking softly. Then, Claire said, I'll go alone. Tom shook his head. Not happening. You can stay close. But I have to be the one to do this. He didn't like it, but he saw the fire in her eyes. She walked up the stairs slowly, her heart thudding. Room 204. The number was burned into her memory from the motel registry. She knocked. The door opened slowly, and there he was, Daniel Carson, older, thinner, a shadow of the boyish charm he once carried. But the eyes were the same. He stared at her, stunned. Claire, she nodded. I saw the obituary. I had to come. She looked him in the eye. You're too late. His face paled. What? You said you wanted to see your son. But he's gone. Daniel blinked. No, he can't be. He died 3 days ago. His mouth opened, then closed again. No, he whispered. Claire's voice stayed steady. You don't get to cry now. You don't get to pretend you were a father. Daniel fell to his knees inside the doorway. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Claire turned to walk away, then paused. There's a grave on hillside. Small, quiet. Red toy car on top. That's the only place you'll ever see him now. She walked down the stairs. Tom was waiting. She got in the car. She didn't look back, and for the first time in years, she felt the wind change. 2 weeks later, Willow Creek felt different. It wasn't the weather, it was still gray in the mornings, bright in the afternoons, and soft with rain at night. It wasn't the buildings or the roads. It was the people. At Wilson's Diner, nobody whispered anymore. The boy who had been buried in silence now had a name that was known, not as gossip but as memory. Ethan James, the quiet boy who had lived on the edge of town. A boy who liked stars and strawberry yogurt. A boy who never asked for much. They didn't talk about Daniel Carson. Not anymore. He had returned for a moment like a shadow moving across a window and then was gone again. Claire never saw him after that night in Newark. She didn't know where he went. She didn't want to know, but 2 days after she confronted him, she found something at Ethan's grave. The red toy car was still there, but now, beside it, sat a small, folded note. I was a coward. I failed him. I failed you. I won't come back. I don't deserve to, but I'll carry him with me until my last breath. Claire read it once, then tucked it inside her coat pocket. She didn't cry. Instead, she sat by the grave, knees in the wet grass, and spoke softly to the earth beneath her. He knows now, she said. But it doesn't matter. You were always mine. She pulled a fresh drawing from her bag one Ethan had made the day before he got sick. It showed a hill, a red car, and a boy flying with stars around his head. She placed it inside a small, weatherproof box and left it by the stone. From now on, she decided, she would stop hiding Ethan's story. She would write about him, talk about him, share the little boy with the big heart who had made her braver than she ever knew she could be. Tom retired from delivering mail years ago, but now every Saturday morning, He walked up to the grave with a small bouquet of daisies. Sometimes he brought other people, teachers, librarians, townsfolk who had asked, what was Ethan like? And Tom would tell them. He told them about Ethan's love for cardboard spaceships, about the red car he never let go of, about how, even in hiding, that little boy had left a mark deeper than most people ever do. It became a quiet tradition in Willow Creek. People stopped by the grave now and then, leaving tiny things, stars made of folded paper, toy cars, handwritten notes. The grave was no longer silent. It was full of voices. Claire moved back into the house on Oak Ridge Lane, the one she once ran from. It was overgrown and dusty, but it had light. It had memories, and it had peace now. She opened the windows, let the wind in, cleaned the floors, repainted the bedroom walls. She left Ethan's room untouched, not as a shrine but as a space full of joy. On the night of his birthday, she lit a single candle and stood under the stars. You have your wings now, she whispered. Then she looked up and smiled, and for a moment, she swore she saw one star blink. A year later, Claire published a book. It was titled, Rain on the Grave, A Mother's Promise. People read it. They cried. They sent letters. Some shared their own stories of hiding, of surviving, of losing and loving. Claire didn't want fame. She wanted truth. And Ethan's name was now written in pages, spoken out loud, remembered. One sunny afternoon, Claire sat on a bench near the grave. A young couple walked up the path with their daughter. The girl was about 6, with bright green eyes and freckles. Is this the grave with the stars and the toy cars? The girl asked. Claire smiled gently. Yes, it is. Who was he? Claire looked at the stone, then at the girl. He was someone who loved without fear, she said softly. Someone who reminded the world that even quiet lives can shine the brightest. The girl nodded like she understood, and for a moment, the wind picked up. The red toy car rolled gently forward, then stopped at Claire's foot. She picked it up, held it close, and smiled through tears. Still playing, she whispered. Still flying. And the town, once silent, continued to remember, not because of the tragedy, but because of the love, because of Ethan, because of a small grave where the rain had once fallen and left behind something beautiful.